Welcome everyone, welcome to the True Mouse Games YouTube channel. My name is Alex, and in tonight's episode of GM Musings, we'll talk about the paths to power. Now, the average campaign, the average story of a group of heroes is more of an adventuring party, right? They fight monsters and save towns from attacking hordes. They might be striking down bandit lords. They might be experiencing some political intrigues, investigating and discovering ancient ruins, thwarting the plots of evil cults, and maybe even fighting off whole conclaves of megalomaniac dragons. However, one thing that player characters very rarely do in campaigns is obtain real power. And by that I don't necessarily mean personal power, as in becoming a nearly unbeatable warrior or a mage that is stronger than any other in the land. I mean the power to influence and command others and to obtain and use massive resources. Basically, the power that you get if you are at the head of some sort of organization. The larger scale this organization is, the better. This can be quite a different type of campaign from what you are used to, but it doesn't have to be. Many people are, for some reason or the other, not too comfortable with this type of campaign and shy away from it. Maybe they think that resource management is too much of a bother, or maybe they think that their player characters, their heroes, can no longer go on adventures once they have obtained such a position. And that's not entirely wrong, but there are a few ways to get out of this predicament. For example, you can keep resource management very simple, and you can hire people, NPCs that is, to do all the boring stuff for your player characters while they're off adventuring if they're not interested in involving themselves in the political machinations of the organization at the moment. There's another worry that I have heard before is, how can a group of player characters rule together? That doesn't really work, does it? Well, it can. If you have a player and a player character that's not going to steal the show from all the others too much, and it's not going to go too power crazy, you can make him or her the ruler and have the other player characters be his close counsel. Or you can have a group that rules together. Maybe your player characters have founded a knight order and they're all knights of the inner circle with no single knight commander as such. Or, like mine did, maybe they have founded a magic academy. So there's many mages in the academy. The academy itself is, however, ruled by a circle of mages, of high mages, which are, of course, the player characters, and they decide together what the academy and its members will do or won't do. There are several reasons to play a campaign where your player characters can rise to real power. Remember the scene where Theoden holds his speech before the riders of Rohan charge the armies of Mordor, who are laying siege to Minas Tirith?
Arise! Arise, riders of Theoden! Spears shall be shaken! Shields shall be splintered! A sword day! A red day! And the sun rises! Rise now! Rise now! Rise! Rise to ruin and the world's ending! Death! Death!
That could be you, your player characters, commanding an army and shouting out their battle cries and holding a speech in front of it. You can command underlings. You can obtain massive resources and have them at your disposal. You can have capable agents, which means that you do not have to worry about all the small things yourself. There's a bandit problem in the forest. Let your NPCs deal with it while you're off fighting the evil lich or something along those lines. You can use the organization to protect your rear, and also, while doing that, you can get really, really rich. You can judge people, you can create laws, you can influence the political structure of a region far more than you could do just as a random band of adventurers, no matter how powerful they might be. You can literally decide the fate of thousands, maybe even tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, and you can change the GM's campaign world for many, many years to come with your actions. Players get to build something lasting, and they get to experience real power. And the Game Master gets to experience the feeling that happens when your players are really drawn into your world. Being at the head of an organization, being part of all these machinations, being able to communicate and negotiate with kings and queens and dukes and the leaders of church organizations on an even level will serve to draw your player characters and their players deeper and deeper into your world and into your story, which is a very rewarding experience for a Game Master, believe me. There's 3 different paths that your player characters can take to power. The first path is power being granted to them by others, usually by some sort of religious or secular authority. Usually that sort of thing is granted as a reward for great deeds, but more nefarious player characters might find a way to blackmail someone in power to give them a piece of that power if they can control this person, this NPC. This path to power is the simplest way of getting in touch with that type of campaign without risking the rest of the campaign, so to speak, too much. It does not usually require too much extra work by your player characters. It can be used to change a campaign that's already existing, that's been running for a while, into one of those paths to power. Your player characters usually have survived and hopefully succeeded in several fairly decent adventures, and they have a reputation, and eventually they will do something that will be very helpful to the realm. And that's where a reward could come in. This reward and this path to power can lead to small-scale power, like, say, a castle being granted to the player characters and maybe the land surrounding the castle, or something massive like a dukedom, a whole province with thousands and thousands of people living in it. This is a great tryout phase, especially because you as the Game Master can directly decide how tricky the path to power will be for your player characters. By simply deciding to give them a place to govern that which is fairly stable, like, say, a small province in a fairly wealthy kingdom, or give them something on a wild, untamed frontier, say an old, half-ruined castle in an area that is constantly under threat by orcs, goblins, and all kinds of undead and other creatures that might be running around. As you might see, there's still plenty of opportunity to have normal adventures, if you so will, if you choose that path to power. The second way to obtain power is take power from someone else, from an NPC or a group of NPCs. This is usually much more player-driven, driven by player agency, than the first path to power. And it might sound a little evil, and it can be quite evil and fitting to more devious, scheming player characters. However, that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. You could take power from an evil organization, maybe by defeating some sort of a bandit king that has ruled a whole province, or a group of monsters, dragons or such, that have been subjugating the people of this area for many decades. And when taking over, when killing that beast or this NPC, the player characters are the natural successors. There's 2 options in this path to power. You can obtain power and take the throne, so to speak, from without or from within. If you're doing it from without, that means that you are an outsider. You are not part of the political structure of the region that you wish to take over. You might have a small army at your disposal, but usually it will just be the group of player characters. And there's a few steps that you can use and turn them into adventures on the way. The first step is to gather information about the specific area and establish contacts within the area, or maybe even within the court. So, who are the important people? Who is the ruler? What are his strengths and weaknesses and such? during that phase, you can maybe use my video about creating complex villains or simple villains that you will also find in this very playlist. After you have established first contact and gathered a lot of information, you will have to gain support from the key figures and or gain support from the population, which is not that easily done if you are not part of the existing power structure, but your player characters can find a way, especially if the existing power structure is not particularly beloved. But if you choose your allies carefully, if you prove yourselves morally good, if you bribe or reward people who help you out, if you make a name for yourself, it can be done. And then, in the end, once all this is prepared, you can actually seize power, which is usually done in a violent way. For instance, killing the ruler in a straight-out combat, or assassinating him, or poisoning him, but it can also be a little more politically subtle. You might be able to blackmail the ruler, or you might be able to forge evidence of such an evil deed that he might have done in the past, and therefore get the population to rise up and demand his removal. Which means that your player characters might wash their hands of the whole deed, yet somehow still, if they have enough influence and enough allies, they can find themselves on the throne. Now, taking power from within an organization might be a little more tricky, but at the same time, if you have the right group of player characters and players, this might be one of the most memorable campaigns that you have ever run. First things, of course, to take power within an organization, your player characters need to become part of that organization. So they need to join the court, ideally, maybe at a fairly low level, maybe just local guardsmen or whatever, and then slowly make their way up, rise up through the court. In that case, they will have to basically prove themselves at first, depending on what position they wish to obtain. The proving might be as simple as having a short combat, a duel with someone else, or it could be as complex as a long string of quests to obtain something extremely valuable, information or some resource that the current ruler or any of his courtiers might desire. Then, once you have proven yourself to be capable, you have to prove yourself to be trustworthy. Then, once you have done so, by removing obstacles and threats to the ruler, ideally, by exposing treason, real or fabricated treason, by enforcing the law of the current ruler, by making allies within the court, and so on, then is the time to take care of the enemies that you would have made during this rise. No courtier is bereft of enemies. Everyone in power has enemies, which is something that we will be talking about more in the next video about power. So either you secure a position that's already there, like say Supreme General of the armies, or you create a position for yourself. This works especially well if you discover a resource that the realm and the ruler did not have before you arrived. Then, of course, it is time to strike at the ruler. This can be openly, or it can be secretly. And if you do so secretly, you have to make sure it stays a secret. And then once you have taken care of the ruler, you are prepared to finally seize power for yourself. However, unless you have overwhelming support, there will be other courtiers, other NPCs that your player characters will be very familiar with by now, because they have been working with or against them for a long time. They will also try to seize power. So you have to be quicker, you have to be better organized. The third path to power is to create power yourself. This is a path that can take quite a long time, but it can be less tricky in many ways than the taking power from someone else version. You need two things, and they can both be obtained through normal adventuring, mostly. First thing you need is resources. If you want to create power for yourself, like a noble title, an order or such, you need a lot of resources. Second thing you need is reputation. Depending on what kind of position you want to obtain, what kind of power you want to wield, the reputation can be very different. Maybe you wish to have a reputation as someone who helps everyone, who is extremely noble, honorable, and always does what they say. Or maybe you want to have a threatening, intimidating reputation, if the power you desire is a darker path. After you have obtained both resources and a reputation, the time has come to gather followers, trustworthy ones, of course, if you can have them. To obtain followers, you should establish a goal that the organization has in mind. Maybe the goal is defeating a specific enemy, or obtaining a specific position, or creating something. Or it could be as simple as gaining more power, gaining more riches. Ideally, more power and more riches for everyone involved. Be aware that depending on what goal you have and what reputation you have, a good game master will send NPCs that are drawn by that sort of reputation and that sort of goals to your company. So if you're a bloodthirsty gang of killers who wishes to obtain more and more power and riches, the people that flock to you will probably not be particularly trustworthy. So while being an evil organization has its benefits, surely you're not bothered with ridiculous morals and laws and such, of course, it also has its drawbacks. For your allies and your minions will be far less trustworthy than the allies and minions of a good aligned organization in general. Once all of this is done and your organization is established, then you can start using it. You can establish allies with other organizations, for you cannot ally with large organizations as well if you're just a small group. And of course, the time has come to start achieving the goals that you have set for your organization. And then finally, this goes for all three methods of power. Once you have gotten power, you will realize maybe that just because you have power, that doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. However, if you have trustworthy underlings especially, then you can leave the organization for time and do whatever you want with your time. Go out adventuring, come back, and put a little bit of time into the organization every now and then draw upon its benefits. As I said, this goes for all three parts to power. But depending on how you got there, your path onward might be very different from another group's path onward, so to speak. Now, in our next video, we will be talking about what it feels like to be in power, how power works, what you need to do to preserve it, and also what opportunities you will gain from being in power. This has already been hinted at in this video a little bit, but we will be talking about it more in the future. Now, this was our GM musings for the night. If you liked our content, subscribe to our channel and like this video. And let me know in the comments, have you ever tried something like this? If yes, what kind of organizations did your players, or did your characters, if you were a player, create? How did it go? Was it as much fun as it is always for me, being the GM to such a group? And if you haven't done so, why not? Is it that something about it scared you away? Is it that you prefer a maybe more simple, not quite as politically oriented type of campaign? Or did you just not want to be bothered with all the resource management that might or might not come upon it? As always, until we see each other again, good luck with your own games, stay safe, and I will see you around. Bye bye.